Good morning. My name is Kelly McCormick, and I'm the Director of Events and Programming here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Growth Basics for Business, a monthly breakfast seminar series that provides a forum to gain useful, do-it-yourself workplace solutions and insightful, actionable tips. Today is our final event in the 2025-2026 series, and I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Special thanks to our Growth Basics for Business sponsor, Combined, a Chubb Benefits company, to whom we are grateful for providing relevant content and support for this series. Today's topic, Navigating the Voluntary Claims Benefit Process, will be presented by Jacqueline Holsworth, Customer Liaison, and Morgan Tribuno, AVP of Claims for Chubb Benefits. Like all of the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and is being recorded. It will be made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com, where you can check out our events page, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and sign up for our weekly email newsletters. Before we begin today's presentation, I want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that enhance our virtual events. If you have any questions for our presenters today, you can type them in the YouTube chat throughout the presentation, and Morgan and Jacqueline will answer them when appropriate during their presentation, and we've reserved time at the end for Q&A. All this to say, please do interact with us and ask questions via YouTube. With that, I'll hand things over to Morgan and Jacqueline to share more about their work and provide today's presentation.
Thanks, Kelly, and good morning, all. My name is Morgan Tribuno. I'm here with Jacqueline Holsworth. We're from Chubb Benefits, a leader in the supplemental health or voluntary benefits space. Earlier this year, members of our team joined this group to talk about the value of these benefits for employees and how this can be a cost-effective solution for employers. Jacqueline and I both work on the claims side of the world, and so this presentation today will reinforce some of those messages, but we'll also talk about, for you as employers, what is the claims experience like? What information is needed? Why is it needed? And then what do we do with it? What does the claims process look like? Chubb has been around for over 100 years, but our office opened here in South Portland in the fall. We're over on Southborough Drive in South Portland. I'm personally a South Portland native, born and raised, and currently live with my family in Scarborough. With that, I'll turn it over to Jacqueline.
You're welcome. Thanks, Morgan. Good morning, everyone. I am Jacqueline Holsworth. Thank you for having us today and spending some time with us. Excited to kind of talk a little bit about what supplemental health benefits are and why they're beneficial. And then we'll kind of talk through some typical product offerings, how they work, and then what type of information is needed to file a claim. And then also how, as an employer, you can mitigate some added stress on your employees and reduce their level of effort in the claim process, trying to kind of help them to be better prepared for their claim experience and kind of walk you through a typical claim life cycle. And then, of course, leave any some time at the end for any questions that you may have. Feel free to add some questions as the presentation goes on, and we can answer those as we go as well. And so, Morgan, if you want to turn us to the first slide. So this slide really kind of just goes over some of those benefits for supplemental health insurance and how, oftentimes these benefits can be overlooked, I think, by an employee, especially when someone already has major medical. They don't necessarily understand why they would need additional coverage. But as we all know, between deductibles and co-pays, services that aren't covered, those bills can add up, pretty quickly, and often in times when people aren't expecting it. Lots of people, live paycheck to paycheck or try to prepare as best that they can. But life happens, and so unexpected medical costs can be hugely impacting. And as an employer, I think it's also a great opportunity to not only entice prospective employees, but also better care for your employees. It's an added layer of financial and emotional security, which obviously can significantly improve, your employee experience, their ability to come to work, and perform and be productive and focus. And so just want to kind of talk through why some of these insurance options can be really beneficial for you and your employees. Certainly, two of the biggest impacts to someone's life or family are their finances and their health. And so supplemental benefits can really provide financial security, kind of helping to bridge that gap between your major medical and then your out of pocket expenses. Um, they also offer coverage for specific needs, right? So, giving your employees the ability to really prepare for different circumstances or events, and really make sure that they're adequately covered. Um, they're also a means for income replacement, right? So these benefits are typically paid directly to your employees for them to use as they choose, however they see fit, and covers things that are outside of just their medical bills, right? So things like rent or groceries or childcare, things that aren't at all covered by your major medical, but can add up very quickly whenever you have a health event that has caused, some unexpected burden to your lives. They also help with, employee well-being, which can certainly improve morale, retention, productivity. We know that, whenever there are added stress in your personal life, it can really impact someone's ability to come to work and to show up and to do their best. And so being able to try and alleviate some of that added stress can certainly help with their overall well-being, and just the culture in and of itself. What's really nice about supplemental health benefits are that they're typically customizable. So employees have the ability to really look at their personal circumstance for themselves or their family, things that maybe they've experienced, or things that they haven't, but they want to be prepared for, and they can really pick and choose the coverage that they feel works best for their lives. And then also, I think most importantly, their added peace of mind. As we all have experienced, life can, throw you curveballs. And as prepared as someone may try to be, there are always things that pop up that you just didn't expect. And these benefits can really help. To better prepare someone for those events that are really impacting, and can sometimes be some very tough and difficult situations, especially when we're talking about serious health issues, things that really impact your ability to continue working or to continue to care for your family. Or cause you to have to be away from your family, whether that's for hospital stays or treatments. These benefits can really add a bit of a safety net, a little bit of a buffer to make very stressful situations a little easier for your employees. And so, just overall, they're very beneficial, and certainly, a positive addition to, I think, employee packages or employee experiences. Morgan, yep, if you want to go to the next slide. So this next slide kind of talks through what your typical product offerings will be in the supplemental space. So for accident, an accident is exactly what it is. It's an unforeseen injury or circumstance that happens. Sometimes it can be something as minimal as a broken toe and you had to go to urgent care, and that was pretty much it. Or it can be something, more serious, where you had a serious accident that caused a serious injury that's going to cause additional treatments or maybe end up in having surgery. And so having that accident insurance not only helps with your copay that you may have for that urgent care visit, or you're meeting your deductible. It may help to kind of bridge that gap for that particular uh, financial burden, but also it helps to cover some things that aren't covered by your major medical. So especially when you have something like a non-serious accident, you go to urgent care, you may require just over-the-counter medications that your major medical doesn't pay for. And so this allows you to be able to file a claim, have some additional funds that can help to cover some of those costs, and typically helps bridge that gap for those types of appointments that maybe aren't covered by your major medical. Another one would be your hospital coverage. So typically your hospital coverage will cover things that are a result of an injury or a sickness. And oftentimes, hospital stays, especially unexpected ones that come from an accident that you weren't prepared for, takes you away from your family, takes you away from your job. You are unexpectedly missing work, maybe having to figure out childcare. And then the loss of income from maybe your work for those days, which are typically less than maybe your elimination period. This helps to kind of give some additional funds to cover those unexpected expenses, so that you can really just care for yourself and stay focused on your recovery, and not necessarily the burden of having to figure out how you're going to be able to cover these unexpected expenses from your hospital stay. Hospital stays can also be very unpredictable, right? You can have an accident, and then go to the hospital to get care, and you find out that you have to have surgery. And so now you're going to be there even longer. And it's even more beneficial to be able to know that you have this additional coverage that's going to help you kind of get through this recovery process, and be able to help in that way. Life insurance is another one. This can be one that I think can be difficult for folks, right? We always think that it's so far down the road, but life is very unpredictable, and life insurance is a really great way to be able to take care of your loved ones when you're no longer there, especially when it's something that is unexpected. It can help with income replacement, helps to cover funeral costs, and just gives you that extra comfort in knowing that if something were to happen and you're no longer there, that your loved ones have the ability to cover those unexpected costs when you're gone. Disability insurance is certainly probably the most beneficial, right? Your work and your family relies on your income, and life is very unexpected. And so anytime that you're going to be out of work, whether it's something that you expected, right, like maternity leave, that's coming, or something's happened, you've had an unexpected illness, or you have an unexpected accident that is going to take you out of work for an undetermined amount of time, that causes a lot of stress on anyone, not knowing how you're going to be able to pay your bills and care for your family, and knowing that you don't know necessarily how long you're going to be out of work. It's very stressful. And stress can also impact someone's ability to fully recover. And so being able to have that safety net to kind of um, help mitigate that financial loss during that time, and be able to get you back to work, and be able to recover is really helpful. And then critical illness. So this is typically a product that's going to cover things like cancer or multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease, types of illnesses that are very impacting to your life, can also impact your ability to work and care for your family. And this is another reason why being able to have those kind of customizable plans, and also multiple coverages can really help someone. So in a situation where maybe someone is diagnosed with cancer, you may need to be out of work for a period of time. You're now having to have treatments. You are having to likely travel for some of that, and so there are a lot of added expenses. Um, and ways that your lives are impacted. And so being able to have both a disability and a critical illness policy, is an added lever, that someone can have to just better be able to, not have to worry about some of the financial burden while you are trying to, um, get yourself healthy again, and also deal with, the stress that's involved when you're diagnosed with something that you weren't, expecting, and certainly something that can be very scary. I think we have some questions. So, what are common misconceptions employers have about voluntary benefit claims? I think that, in my experience, personally, it's that people, I think, are under the impression that when I have major medical, I'm covered. That's my medical insurance, and if something happens, I'm going to file a claim with my medical insurance, and it's going to be covered. And sometimes it's really after the fact that people realize that there are still a lot of expenses that are incurred whenever there is an event, that's impacting your ability to work and also your health. So major medical may cover your time at, the hospital or with your provider, or some of those prescriptions or those treatments. But there are a lot of expenses outside of that that aren't covered by major medical. So things like childcare. So trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for this additional, financial burden that I have now, or you're having to travel a great distance to get somewhere. And so gas, missing work, things like that add up very quickly. And so supplemental health benefits are direct payments typically to the employee for you to use as you choose, right? So your major medical is going to reimburse the facility or the provider that you've used. And then also you likely have a deductible that you have to meet, and you have copays that you have to pay out of pocket. And so supplemental insurance is a direct payment for you to use how you choose, whatever way is most beneficial for you. You're able to now have this additional income to try and cover, those expenses that just aren't covered by your major medical. All right. So next slide, really talks about the type of information that you want to have ready, whenever you're going to file a claim. In our experience, what we have found, is that, what can be, I think, an added burden for someone is that you've now had some type of an event, that has caused a ripple in your life. And so now you have to file that claim, and there can be a level of effort on the part of the employee when they're filing that claim. And that can be, stressful also, things that maybe you didn't expect. Documents that you maybe didn't realize that you were going to need that you're now having to get. And so, as an employer, especially, any way that you're able to better prepare an employee that in the event that you do have to file a claim under any of these coverages, being able to really educate them on the type of information that they'll need to file a claim, um, really makes the claim experience that much smoother. Being able to file your claim with all the information that you think that you're going to need for that claim, makes the provider, or whatever insurance company that you have be able to more quickly review that claim and make a decision. And if approved, get that payment to your employee even faster without having to have, more go back and forth trying to request for that information. Typically, your providers will have multiple filing options. Typically, there will be an online self-service portal where the employee can file their own claims electronically. That more often than not is the best and easiest way for someone to file a claim. It means that your claim is being opened and filed more quickly. There are less delays in that claim creation and gets that claim reviewed even quicker. If that's not an option, you'll typically still have ways to either phone in and call in your claim, email, fax, mail. Those are your typical filing options. And then for all claims, you'll typically need to complete your claim form. So there'll usually be a claim packet that has all of the questions and information that you need to answer to initiate that claim. Typically, there will also be a HIPAA authorization, and we always want folks to go ahead and sign that and make sure that you submit it with your claim because this makes your insurance provider be able to request records on your behalf to get those records even quicker. And so um, you also want to make sure that you have the information about your loss. So whatever the loss is that you have, whether it's an accident or an injury or a disability, you want to make sure that you have the date. So if there was an injury, what was the date the injury took place, and any proof of loss that you have. So any medical records, discharge summaries, things like that. You want to make sure that you have that ready. And then we can dig in a little more granular to the different types of coverage and the specific documents that you'll likely need to have or things that you'll want to think about for those particular products. Um, so for accident, you always want to be able to have ready and prepared for your claim. What was the injury? The date and the description that the accident took place, and how did the accident happen, right? So if you were going down the stairs at home and you tripped and you fell and you broke your leg, that's the type of information that you want to make sure that you're including in your claim document, the date that the injury happened or the accident happened and how it happened, and then have together all of the treatment that you had for that accident. So where did you go to have that accident? Or seen for that accident? Did you go to an urgent care? Or did you go to the emergency room? That's really important because typically there are benefits associated with different providers that you go to. So if you went to an ER, there are likely emergency room specific benefits, and then same for urgent care. So making sure that you are including all of that information up front, the treatments that you had received, and also treatments that you know you're going to have. So if you go to the ER for an accident, maybe you broke your leg and it's going to result in a follow-up appointment and then possibly physical therapy. You want to make sure that you provide all of that information up front. And what that does is that makes it so that the claim adjuster knows, do I need to ask for or anticipate additional information, or how can I prepare for ongoing benefits that you may have under this coverage so I can make it a little bit easier on you down the road as you continue that treatment to try and proactively help you with those benefits to ease some of that burden. Um, for hospital, very similar. You want the nature of your injury or your sickness. So your hospital stays will typically cover both an accident or a sickness. So if it's an injury, it's the same thing. How did that injury occur? When did it occur? But for a sickness, what was that onset? What was your date of diagnosis? A description of that onset or the accident, and then also making sure that you have the hospital name and address that you were seen at, the physician's name and address as well. And then Any hospitalization dates, your discharge summary is typically very helpful and will have a lot of the information that you need. And you're typically able to get that when you are discharged. So being able to have people be prepared for that, that if you have hospital coverage and you are at a hospital and you stay at a hospital, when you're discharged, make sure to get that document, because if you have it and you can go ahead and submit it with your claim, it makes it that much easier for you to get your benefit payment. You also want to think through making sure that you have the summary of what actually occurred during that hospital stay. So, were you in a regular room or observation room? Were you admitted to intensive care? Things like that. You want to make sure that you have that prepared when you file your claim, because there are typically associated benefits, not just for the type of room that you stayed at, but also the different treatments that you may have had during that stay. Um, and then critical illness. So critical illness will typically require additional medical documentation for that claim. So making sure that you have the pathology typically for whenever that diagnosis was made, or any medical records pertaining to that, any imaging that was maybe had. So, for instance, if someone has a stroke and stroke is a covered benefit under your critical illness policy, there are going to be medical records when you were seen for that stroke, both showing the diagnosis from a physician that you've had a stroke, but also neurological imaging. And so you want to make sure that you have both of those when you submit your claim. Or for something like a diagnosis of cancer, there's going to be a pathology report where you were definitively diagnosed with that condition. And so that is the medical documentation that you typically need to have for your critical illness claim. So making sure that you have those medical records that pertain to the diagnosis and show your diagnosis date, and show the treating physician, and any other services that maybe you had, because different critical illness policies may cover additional things like treatment. So there may be chemotherapy benefits associated with a cancer diagnosis. So really any education just around whatever that diagnosis is and any treatments that you may have, those medical records will typically be needed for that particular claim. Um, Disability coverage, I think, is the coverage that an employer can be most helpful in preparing their employee for that claim experience, because some of that documentation is reliant on the employer. So a person wants to make sure that they not only have the nature of the injury or the sickness and the date of the diagnosis, but also they'll need documentation from their physician, and their physician showing, what is the diagnosis and what are the dates of disability and what are those restrictions and those limitations. So the physician is really going to need to typically fill out a form. For us, it's called an attending physician statement. And that physician's really outlining what your treatment plan is, when you were diagnosed, how is this limiting, and for how long, what's the duration, and then if open-ended, what's the ongoing treatment plan. And then from an employer standpoint, the burden is typically on the employer to provide the job description. So, what are their typical responsibilities, their role and responsibilities? What are any physical requirements that they may have for that particular position? Their last day worked, income verification. So both what is their actual salary amount, but then any ongoing pay that they may have. So is there sick pay or PTO that they're being paid? The employer has that burden to supply that information. And then also just confirmation of their last day worked and how long they're anticipated to be out. Any questions on documents that are typically needed or ways to prepare an employee for filing a claim? All right. So Morgan, if you want to go to the next slide. Um, so this gives kind of your typical outline of what the life cycle of a claim looks like. So like we talked about before, you'll usually have several different options for how to file your claim. And so once that claim is filed and your insurance provider has notice of that claim, this is typically what the process will look like. So that claim will be filed. It'll be assigned to a claim adjuster, and that claim adjuster will start to review exactly what's being claimed, what exactly has happened, and then look through the documentation that's been submitted. And determine what possible coverages may fall under for this claim. So, for instance, if you have an employee who has taken on the full suite of benefits. They have accident, they have hospital, they have disability, and they have critical illness. That claim adjuster is going to look at that claim and assess what products may be associated with that particular loss, and then review for all possible coverages. They'll also look to see if all of the documentation has been submitted that they'll need to review to make a decision. So like we talked about, if it's a critical illness claim, an adjuster may look at that and see that there's been a diagnosis of cancer. And so an adjuster is immediately going to see, have they submitted that pathology? Do I have medical records that are showing that proof of loss? And so once they do an initial review on that claim, they'll know, do I have enough documentation to continue to move forward, or do I need additional information in order to continue the review? And if an adjuster does require additional information, that's when there should be some type of reach out to the insured to get the information that they need and explain next steps. That HIPAA authorization is also very important at that stage because if they have that, they'll typically have a process for requesting records on behalf of the insured as well, which they'll need that signed HIPAA form for. And then in some way communicate to the insured what information it is that they need, and then how long do they have to submit that information, what are the different ways that they can submit that information, and be able to provide expectations on communication. That's usually the point where your insurance provider should be outlining to the insured all the ways that they can communicate with their claim adjuster or with the company in order to work to get those documents that they need, or answer any questions that they may have, or help them through the claims process. Sometimes that is a point where someone may have thought that they submitted all the information that they needed, and so there's confusion as to why there's additional information being requested. And then so that's where kind of the relationship between the insured and the insurance provider is really important, so that they're setting those expectations and really helping the insured through the claim process. Um, and then once an adjuster has all of the information that they need to review, they're going to start to look through eligibility and the policy definitions, understanding the facts of that particular claim, and then reviewing against any policy provisions. In some cases, there may need to be some type of a medical review, or have some type of a medical expert assist in reviewing that claim. An example could be um, a diagnosis of, say, a stroke. Um, that can be one where the medical may not definitively show that someone had a stroke. And so there may need to be a medical expert that reviews that to determine if what occurred meets the policy definition of a stroke. And so typically your insurance provider will have some type of a medical review process. Um, and then also they'll review any other eligibility that they need. And then once they have all of that information, they'll be able to make a decision. I see we have a question. How long does the average claim take to reach a first decision of approved and denied? So that's a really good question. Um, and I would say that different providers may have different turnaround times. So you want to make sure that you have a good understanding with your provider of what their expected turnaround times are for their claims. What I can tell you is that some claims are more simple or straightforward and will typically require less time. So, for instance, something like an accident, someone broke their toe, they went to urgent care, they were treated, they were sent home, and they submit the itemized bill from that urgent care stay, and they submit that claim. That claim is very straightforward. You likely have all the information that you need to review for the accident policy with that submission. And so it may only take a few days for you to have your benefit approved and your payments issued. Then you may have something that is a little bit more complex. So, depending on the policy, there may be some other provisions like pre-existing condition exclusions would be one that can cause a claim to take a little bit longer because there needs to be an investigation during a look back period to see if the condition is pre-existing before being able to make a decision on the claim, or it's just a critical illness claim where the diagnosis isn't specifically outlined in the documents that have been submitted. And so additional records need to be requested. And sometimes that can be a little lengthy. Providers can take a little bit longer when a third party is requesting the medical records and not the patient themselves. And so that can also cause a bit of a delay. Um, so it's hard to say what the typical turnaround time would be. Typically, once all information is submitted and everything is kind of wrapped up in a bow and ready for a decision, that can usually just take a few days, but sometimes it's really the length of time and getting all the information that's needed for that claim that can take a little bit longer. And so once all that information is submitted and an adjuster has all of the required documents to review for that claim, it's time for them to make a decision. And so usually that's going to be approved or denied. And the typical process for an approval, your insurance provider will have some type of way to communicate an approval or a status update on a claim. Letting someone know that your claim's been approved, and then however they chose to receive their funds, which would typically be either by check or some type of an electronic payment option. They'll be notified of that, and then they'll receive their claim payment, and it's direct to the insured, and they now have that payment to do with what they'd like. And then your claim denial, um, for whatever reason, there was something about that claim that did not meet the definitions under the policy or was possibly an exclusion under the policy, and so it's not a payable claim. And they should receive typically a letter outlining exactly why their claim was denied, um, providing that rationale, and then also any appeal or next steps. So if there's additional information that they want to submit or they want a re-review of that claim, that should all be outlined in that denial letter, explaining what they can do next. Any other questions about the life cycle? Okay. And then We added in here some of our voice of the customer results. So comments that claimants have made specific to their claims experience. And so you'll see here kind of what we talked about, like those not so serious, more simple claims, like for an accident. Someone said, when my son broke his arm playing soccer, our accident insurance covered the ER visit and follow-up appointments that our main health plan didn't, and they didn't have to dip into their savings. I think that is something that we hear a lot, especially for those kind of quick hit, urgent care visits for accidents, especially for families with kids who play sports. Those urgent care visits can add up. And so we hear that a lot about how beneficial that particular policy was. Um, Another one would be critical illness. So you'll see here, when I was diagnosed with cancer, the critical illness insurance provided a lump sum payment. It helped cover travel costs for treatment and allowed my spouse to take unpaid leave to support me. We hear that a lot. When someone's diagnosed with a critical illness, it is one of the toughest situations that they've had, and they're now having to file a claim for that. We take it, very serious in trying to really empathize with that person and make their claim experience as smooth as possible, and relieve any burden on them, knowing that it's such a difficult time. And we hear that so often, how helpful it was to have that large lump sum payment at a time where there are a lot of um, unknowing, a lot of unknown that you're now going down, a lot of added expenses, a lot of additional um, kind of responsibilities or burdens that pop up, and trying to figure out how you're going to maneuver, through this, especially when, you still have kids and you're kind of worrying about how to be able to support them while you're going through your treatments, and having that additional income to be able to use as you need to make that process just a little bit easier and a little more smooth, is very helpful. And then, disability insurance for sure. You'll see here, like after my back surgery, I couldn't work for several weeks. The disability insurance replaced a portion of my income, which helped us keep up with our regular expenses. Those are, you know, it can happen to anyone at any time. And people really rely, obviously, on their paychecks. And so when something happens and you aren't receiving that regular income, um, you know, even when someone tries to prepare, your savings can get eaten up very quickly. And being able to have additional income during that period of time just really helps to make life a little bit more easy during those unexpected events. We have another question. What trends are you seeing in claims utilization or employee engagement? From my perspective, and Morgan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think that for us, it's really about making sure employees are educated on their product offerings, and then also reminding them that they have those particular policies, and reminding them to file those claims. That's something that we hear a lot from different employers, ways to just continue to remind people of the coverages that they've signed up for, and making sure that they're remembering to file those claims. We certainly see utilization towards the end of the year, like when it comes to wellness claims, when people are remembering that, like, oh, I forgot to file that, and so making sure to get those claims in. Those are some trends I've noticed. Morgan, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think typically carriers will meet with each employee during enrollment, and Jacqueline talked about the customization. That for me, I've got 3 young knuckleheads at home, and we're at urgent care more often than I would like. So those types of benefits make sense for me. But employees that feel invested in by their employers and see that these benefits are a product offering that is really tied to their employer, we do see work with employers around attrition rates and people staying with employers longer, and absolutely see gains on the employee engagement side. So I do see a strong correlation between employees who feel invested in by their employers through their benefits offerings and employee engagement.
So if you go back to
Oh, we have another question. What should organizations look for in a voluntary benefits provider when evaluating claim support? From my perspective, I think the importance of the employee experience, the claims experience, and communication is most important. Product offerings are pretty typical, and are very similar. Different provisions may be out there. But what I think really sets different providers apart is really how the employee experience is and what that communication is like. Wanting to make sure that there are quick turnaround times, making sure that your provider is wanting to get any approval payments out there as quickly as possible, offering payment methods like some kind of electronic payment or ACH, a way for them to get it quicker than just a check. Making sure that there are digital avenues for them to go down so that you have the ability to file a claim in the middle of the night if you need to, that you have options for being able to file your claim and submit your documents, and then understand where your claim is at the during every process at your convenience, and being able to get the information that you need when you need it, and that communication is really you want to look for a provider where that's important to them, that your employee understands and feels supported and knows that they have someone at their disposal to help them through that claims process.
we can provide them with guidance. So when we say
Any other questions?
Great. Well, thank you, Jacqueline, for walking us through that. Appreciate everyone's time today. Kelly, thank you so much for having us. This has been an absolute blast.
Oh, thank you. This was a big topic to cover, and you did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much for your time and expertise this morning. We appreciate it very much.
Great.
Do you have
Thanks
any
for having
closing
us.
thoughts?
We opened our office in September, and just super happy to be a part of this organization. And if there's ever any questions anyone ever has or anything we can do to help, please know that we're here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. With that, we'll start to close things up. We really appreciate Combined Chubb Benefits Company's support of this series. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Riley Legere, for helping to produce yet another successful virtual event behind the scenes. Thank you, Riley. And last, certainly not least, thank you to everyone watching this morning. If you're interested in continuing the conversation with Morgan and Jacqueline, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to resources, link to the recording and the presentation, so we can keep this conversation going. And with that, I'd like to thank you for a great season of Growth Basics for Business. Stay tuned for an event survey from the Chamber coming soon, where you can share what you want to learn about in future Chamber signature events. And thank you again to Combine for their support of this series. Have a wonderful day.